This again now is 4810 wide angle, and you see almost nothing. Again, in replicating this science, in replicating this trail, you've got to do these steps. You've got to order the prints, you have to print them light so that the surface is kind of overexposed so that you see the faint stuff hanging in the sky, and you then process it using various algorithms to bring out detail, sharpening and all that, and lo and behold, amazing things are there. Now, this is 4816, part of that sequence taken across the region of the moon in the front called Sinus Medi. You brighten it up, look what's there. I'm particularly impressed with this. I mean, this to me is still astonishing. This is the remains of ancient lunar towers. Geometric glass, shattered and battered and almost gone, that basically remind me of McCall and some of his kind of interesting imaginations. McCall is one of the official NASA artists who painted the mural over at the Air and Space Museum of Apollo 11 landing on the moon. If you look at the moon from the Earth, this is a photograph taken from the Earth, our model now is that these domes, these gridded networks of stuff hanging in the sky, are over what we see on the front side. The visible side is the mare. How can we tell? Because if you simply brighten one of these pictures, you'll see right here over this mare a brightened, increased scattering. That's the glass of the dome shining with sunlight not reaching the ground. In other words, the high stuff gets sun first, and then the terrain underneath gets sun later because of the way geometry and rising and setting sun works. So this is one additional confirmation. There are many more. This is a Surveyor 6 shot that was taken back in the 60s, unmanned spacecraft after sunset, showing not only brilliant beads of light along an airless lunar horizon. Remember, no atmosphere. And NASA has been arguing for years about this explanation. These are bright enough to overwhelm the Vidicon on the camera, but you also see this incredible geometric array of something scattering sunlight sticking up above the horizon. Now, the conventional NASA explanation is, oh, that's the sun's corona. Wrong. The sun's corona does not have horizontal and vertical shattered geometry. So it's something else. I wish they had shown us the view in color. That would tell us a lot. This is now a lunar orbiter picture from Lunar Orbiter 4. It's 83M. This is a mile-tall object we call the shard, casting a shadow. This is a photo registration mark on the film put on by Kodak. This is a very curious thing. This is a seam line of the mosaic of mechanical pictures put together on the ground after the spacecraft read them back to Earth. Very primitive technology, scanning film, sending it back, reconstructing. No digital now, all analog back in 1964, 65, 66. If you look at this closely, it turns out to be this. It is a 6 or 7 mile high tower with a knob on top and glass extending down to the surface. This prairie fire effect is more glass sticking up. Remember, the lunar sky should be pitch black. This is the stuff that Ken caught them painting out. And the reason that this is still there and is so bright is because it's a big mass of glass. It takes a lot of energy to shatter this material with meteor bombardment over millions of years, so the inner core is still there and the outer parts have been destroyed, and so you see a density going from almost nothing outside to a high density inside as the glass is shrinking. It's kind of like it's melting, except it's not melting. It's being whittled away through erosion from micrometeorite abrasion over millions of years. Now recently, when James Oberg started getting intrigued with what's going on, he's the science correspondent for MSNBC, and we talked to Jim for years. We've known him, I've known him, Ken's known him, Ken worked with him. He's dismissed all this as fantasy for years, until our press release announcing this morning came out, and then he started looking at the NASA websites, looking for exactly the kind of thing that I said was there, which is really good, Jim. I'm glad you're finally looking. And he came up and started sending around to his network this Lunar and Planetary Institute set of frames from Apollo 10, which we found back in 1995 in the NSS D.C. laboratory when we went and had our 2-day visit. And I called it then the battleship, because it was big as a battleship, and it was obvious that the astronauts had taken 3 frames. Notice how they centered this object in the frame. They saw it, They photographed it, they were curious, and the analysis that we published in our Planetary Horizons magazine, part of Enterprise back then, in print is 12 years old. You know, I'm glad Jim's looking, but he's kind of, 12 years late. Because we were on it, we showed it to the people at NSS D.C., they had no explanation. This is close up of the first frame. Notice the weird geometry. Here's the moon. This thing should not be there. It's not a photographic defect because the next picture, it changes aspect ratio. On the third picture, the aspect ratio changes even more. FearTech did a really cool analysis. I scanned this. We rotated it so the lunar horizon is horizontal. You see there's other things in the sky, this stuff, and there's all kinds of weird crud, but it seems to have a cutoff. In other words, this seems to be at the edge of something. You'll notice, by the way, that this weird stuff covers the sprocket holes. What that says is this is not first generation film. This has been copied and copied and copied from the original film, and it's been expanded in scale so it covers the sprockets to make it look like it's not real, that it's simply noise, but in fact it's part of the cover-up. This is a real object. Here's another view of it. Here's the third view. And then when you do this analysis, which FearTech did, you rotate it around, you can see details, you can see it's changing as you're moving past it. Parallax is changing. It's a three-dimensional. We estimate that it may be a mile or so in diameter and several tens of miles away from the spacecraft. Can you imagine what the astronauts felt as they look out the window and they see something, the size of Berkeley cruising by out the window? Of course, it's sitting still, it's embedded like a fly in amber in this grid, and they're moving past it at several thousand miles per hour. If they hit it, that's all they wrote. There is a history of a NASA spacecraft that did hit one of these things, and its disappearance makes a wholly interesting tale, which we don't have time to go into this morning. Okay, this is FearTech's 3D analysis showing the three frames, 1, 2, and 3. It's consistent. It's an obvious, real physical object. What is it? I think it's the top of one of these towers, still embedded in this grid. Here's another one. This was a photograph that was swiped, literally stolen off the NASA administrator's desk back in the 1990s and brought to me when I was on the East Coast outside New York, handed to me physically. I scanned it. There is a several miles high tower in Mare Crisium located just to the left of Picard here. This is the crater Picard, and it has amazing geometry. And if you whittle away all the bottom part and leave just the top, I think that's what was photographed on the far side of the moon. And again, it goes back to FearTech's reconstruction of the grid. Here's another one. This is from Apollo 10, 4822. Front side of the moon, Sinus Muddy. Here's the Hyginus Rill. Here is a little object on a print that I got out of Goddard that was sent to me by one of my colleagues inside NASA, very highly placed. He went down to the lab. He simply had them duplicate from the negative this print. It sent me a 16 by 20. It had this amazing object on it, okay? This object we call the castle, because it looks basically like the Disney castle that was named after the one in Germany, whose name I forget. There's a whole matrix of stuff here, other glass stuff. The cool part about this is this wire. This is a cable. It is obviously a cable with what we call a catenary curve. What does that mean? Take a thread, all right, or take a chain. Ladies, take your jewelry, take your necklace off, hold it, and the weight in the middle will cause the chain or the string or whatever to form this beautiful sweeping catenary curve if something massive is hanging from the chain.